It's one of the fastest growing industries in the market, and that growth is really just getting started. Joining me today is Cameron Chell, the CEO of Draganfly Drones. Cameron, I am so glad to have you back on the show. The first time we had you on was last summer, and you talked about the drone industry was about to 10x. And boy, have we already seen that happen. Your stock, along with several other drone companies, are up well over 100% in the last year, but I know that there's still a ton of growth left to come. So give us an update. What kind of investment are we seeing kind of across the board in drones right now?
The industry itself is, I always liken it back to the internet days where everybody thought, oh, the internet's going to be the greatest thing. But, when we look back 10 or 20 years, it's exponentially bigger than we ever could have imagined. That is really what's unfolding in the drone industry. If we think about Amazon back in the day, it was a .com bookseller. But if we look at what Amazon is today, it is an incredibly important piece of all of our infrastructure. And so there will be a select few drone stocks that transcend being a drone manufacturer and will become information and intelligence companies. And the reason being is that nothing collects data better than a drone. You're talking about an aerial platform that in literally seconds or minutes can collect everything from underground radar to air monitoring to cell phone communication to be part of a mesh network. We have drones today that can read heart rate, respiratory rate, blood pressure, blood oxygen level, O2 max, all of those from the air. And so when you think about being able to collect that type of data and then feed it into AI engines, and it's unique data for specific, governments or companies or whatever the case is, that becomes their competitive advantage. Companies like Google, they own the data space in the digital world. Somebody's going to own that data space in the physical real world. And it has to be a physical product that does it, that's in the real world. And that will be drones.
Yeah, this drone story has been so interesting because it's really an AI story. It's a robotics story. It's all moving into this automation, and drones hit so many of those boxes. And like you said, that information is so essential. And it's also why we're seeing so much investment in drones right now. Drones have been around for forever, but the investment is really coming now with that AI implementation as well. Pairing these two together has become, so many implications for a lot of different fields, but defense is the main one. And that's where we're seeing a lot of headlines and a ton of investment. Let's talk about that headline from the U.S. Department of Defense back in December. They're encouraging drone companies like yours that manufacture in the U.S. to build at least 300,000 drones in a short time frame. Talk about how that impacts your company and really the industry as a whole.
The impact of the Department of War's initiative called Drone Dominance is so big that one initiative alone sucks up all the supply in North America. Not to mention what the specific Marines are doing, or the Navy's doing, or the Air Force is doing, or what industry is doing, or what other countries are doing, or everything else. Drones provide such an asymmetric advantage, meaning they are so versatile and can be produced at a relative cost so inexpensively compared to what they do, compared to, we'll call it what are now traditional systems, that every military and defense in the world is rearming right now. It is an entirely new race that is much more tactical and much more palatable than even like the Cold War type of race, because also every nation can participate in it. So it's a strategic imperative to pretty much every nation in the world. So just in terms of meeting the immediate requirements, there's one program in the United States that sucks up all the supply. So you can see the industrial base, and that's just one program. There's dozens and dozens of programs that are live now. And there are very few companies, there's lots that are trying to enter and get into it, but there's very few companies that actually have the true experience to actually manufacture and fly in situation an aircraft. Anybody can, buy drone parts off Amazon and throw it together and think they're a drone company. Well, when you're talking about mission critical, over people, lives depending on things, it's an entire different level of regulation, level of experience, level of scalability, all the rest of it. And there's very few players out there that can do that on a relative basis.
Yeah, I know Draganfly's been around for over 25 years. So you guys have the experience. You've been doing this for a long time. And the other thing is the North American manufacturing. That's the main key key for any of that investment. Like you said, every country in the world is looking into drone manufacturing, but they're not looking at those cheaper Chinese drones. They're looking to build those drones in-house, bringing that manufacturing to the US and to North America. So talk about your manufacturing plan. Draganfly is a Canadian company, but you also manufacture in the US.
Yeah, our primary market has been the US for pretty much all of our existence. When we were doing a ton of non-recurring engineering work for the military primes over the last, kind of 15 or 20 years. And so that's always been our primary market. So we do have manufacturing capability in both the United States and in Canada. So we produce made in USA product, we produce in made in Canada product. And candidly, as the company and as the industry evolves, we'll be producing made in UK, product, made in XYZ company product, because every country is air quote nationalizing, its in-house or its in-country capability for two reasons. One, they can afford to. So for the first time, you could really build defense mechanisms at a low end cost. And the second thing is nobody can afford to have their supply chain or their technology compromised in this regard. So it is an entirely new, kind of manufacturing base that needs to be regionalized. And I do believe there's lots of great comps for us in the space out there. But one of our very, very unique capabilities that we're well ahead of the curve on is our multi-domain, multi-sovereign manufacturing capabilities.
Yeah, there's so many things to cover here. There's a lot I want to get into. I really am excited to talk about your stock because it's been performing so well and there's a lot of really big outlooks for it. But I'm going to save the stock discussion for a little bit further on in this interview. I want to talk a little bit more. Something retail investors are always interested in is they don't want to get into a stock that's exploded and gone so high because they worry that there's not enough growth left. The investments that you're talking about, the nationalization of bringing more of these manufacturing facilities in-house, is this all just getting started? Talk about that growth outlook. We've seen so much growth already, but how much of that growth is still ahead for drone companies like yours?
If you think back to 2000 or 1999 or 2001 or whatever, well, the internet, once everybody has a web page, what's the growth going to be? Well, first of all, not everybody has a drone even yet, or even close to it. And what's the growth going to be? Well, the applications are going to continue to drive demand. If we ever thought that the internet was going to be used to do our doctor's appointments or to do basically anything and everything that we do today, it's the same thing with the drone space. Now, I'm totally blessed to be in a spot to see where that future is, because I see all these applications being built on and all the use cases that are unfolding for drones, even well beyond the military applications, which are the most obvious ones right now. Where this ends up going is actually beyond imagination at the moment. However, on the shorter term, yeah, it's just getting started. If we think about it, took 25 years for a military to really start to adopt drones. And that was Ukraine. We've been around, we've been, kind of touting it to militaries for quite some time. And of course, they wanted big man systems, or they wanted very, very big drone systems. And as much as we stood on our soapbox and talked about the advantage of small drone systems, because very cheaply you can control airspace. And if you can control airspace, you're going to control your theater. And what we saw in Ukraine was an asymmetric situation where we had a disadvantaged nation, controlling airspace, therefore controlling theater, and stopping Goliath, like unexplainably almost. Now, interestingly enough, it was the U.S. Marines that introduced the concept of drone warfare to the Ukrainians. Now, the Ukrainians have taken it to a whole new level and are complete world leaders in it right now. I just, hats off, hearts out, like unbelievable what they've done. But it took that theater in order for the larger tier one militaries to go, wait a minute, this really is game changing. And so it took 25 years to get to 2022. And then in 2022 until now, and maybe up until, kind of mid last year, the tier one militaries were like, okay, this is interesting, but they didn't start putting out concepts of operations, use cases, RFPs, or anything really until the end of 2025. And really the first, sizable RFIs and RFPs are now just hitting, and people are just starting to be selected. So this is the beginning of the beginning And when you really kind of get your head around that, you're, wow, this is a multi-trillion-dollar space.
Yeah, it is still very early for drones because this manufacturing is just getting started and all of that investment is just coming along. Like you said, the US demand alone would pretty much take all of the supply that's currently available. But it's
Yeah.
not just the US investment happening. We're going to talk in a minute about a new US partnership that you have, Draganfly in specific. But I want to talk about another announcement, very, very recent, from Canada, which is where your company started out at. Talk about that investment that Canada just announced too, specifically into defense and into drone defense.
As evidence to the remilitarization of every nation on its own premise, on its own accord, the Canada just came out with, it's been expected for a while, but it just came out with what's called the defense industrial strategy. And the defense industrial strategy is all about Canada, which isn't some third world nation by any stretch. I mean, it's like the sixth largest economy in the world. They've committed, $88 billion over the next 5 years to rearm their defense with a minimum 70% Canadian content built. Close to 5 billion of that is directly targeted at category 1 and category 2 drones. There's one for sure, us, manufacturer. There's arguably two manufacturers in Canada who make two totally different types of drones. And so if we think about the implications for Draganfly in this case, it's as big a market potential as anybody in the world. So the strategy came out on Monday. And as of Sunday night, I'm on a plane and my whole next week is in Ottawa. But we see this happening in every single country right now. And again, in that particular document, the Canadian government has said that drones are a strategic imperative. They are a sovereign imperative, meaning drones are going to be made in Canada, backed by Canada, Canadian technology, and again, this isn't necessarily about Canada. It's about the positioning of every single country in the world and what they're doing. Now, we just happen to be so blessed and manufacture in the Canadian and the US market and are well established. But again, over time, to assume that we're not going to be in the UK or other places, it would be a fallacy. We have that opportunity. We're certainly going to make sure we execute here well first, but we're pretty excited about what's unfolding for the whole industry. But I think in particular, just for Draganfly, it's a pretty extraordinary time.
Yeah, I think investors watching this might be getting excited about that potential. You can see the potential for growth in the future, that the demand is coming from many different places, but they also care about those contracts and what's happening right now.
Yeah.
Are those profits actually showing up? And they are for your company. I think the announcement that you just talked about with Canada, the fact that you're one of two manufacturers currently in the country and they're investing nearly $5 billion, of course, you're going to be getting a portion of that investment. I think you're so well positioned for that. And I think in the US too, that investment is happening, but you are already securing those contracts. Talk about the most recent one you have with the US Air Force.
Yeah, so we were selected with our partner, Del Mar Aero, to provide FPV drones and training to the U.S. Air Force Special Command units. So every quarter, they're running a cohort of their Special Command units through the training facilities at Pendleton. And our folks are supplying the drones, which were selected for some very unique reasons, which we're super proud of, and also the training. The training is being done by us and by Del Mar Aero. We're involved because we've been boots on the ground in Ukraine since 2022. So we have some very unique lessons, knowledge, capabilities. Much of our design work comes from that experience that happened there. And again, I do think it's a differentiator about Draganfly is that we're really not just about building a great product. We're really about building a capability. And so when you're winning contracts that aren't just about your, great product, but they're about training for great capabilities, we think we're doing some of the right things here. Now we got to be on our toes every single day because the military customer is rightly so very demanding, and there's lots of people are seeing dollar signs in this space, so they're rushing in and wanting to participate. And some of them are going to do really well, and some of them are going to find out this is a really hard business. and it's a mission critical business. So we're honored and blessed, and we're lucky to be able to serve. We won in the fight, and so right now we're getting that opportunity in spades.
The drone industry is not just about making as many drones as possible, although that is a big part of it. The other part is being able to use them and really changing the game of the military theater, the training that you're talking about. There's so many other opportunities other than just manufacturing, and I think the companies that fill those well are going to be uniquely positioned to do well and win more of those contracts too. So
That is so well said. The product is a big part of the capability, but it's about the capability. So the level of detail that we're thinking through in terms of providing concepts of use case training and concept of operation training is right down to the detail of what are the backpacks like? How quickly can they be undone? Can things be done in the dark? How protective are they? How many drones can you get in a backpack? Just like all the things that matter when somebody's in situation. And that tends to be winning some favor for us right now.
yeah, one other question. We've talked all about military. The other thought I have on the growth potential is the military took a long time, but they finally came on board to realizing how valuable drones could be for defense and in a military situation. But I think you hinted towards this earlier. The military isn't your only customer. There's plenty of different industries where drones are becoming popular. Are you already seeing more contracts and growth and demand from other sectors as well?
Yeah, well, certainly public safety, which is, kind of like a half a step away from military, search and rescue, obviously. But on the industrial side, what we're really seeing now is the conversations that we're having aren't about, oh, drones, interesting. They're like, a drone can do this. Are you guys the best choice to do it? So we're doing things like building robotic drones that re-edge the edges of wind turbines. We're doing things like drones that stand up cell towers, for reconstruction or for emergency management, or for maintenance, right? We're doing things like placing highly specialized equipment actually on power lines, to monitor power lines, for fire, for consistency, for data, for all kinds of things, and then moving those tools off to other. These are things that people had to figure out how to get into remote areas, and ladders and ropes and harnesses and helicopters, and it's all like an automated process now. And so the ROIs on these things are just fantastic. So they're propagating into these industries at a faster and faster pace. And you'll see many of these types of announcements for us over the course of the next year or two with major tier one companies that are building them at scale.
Yeah, I think that is also a fascinating part of the drone industry is the opportunities for how these could be used and the creativity that people and companies like yours have with robotics and the innovations that private companies come up with on how they can use drones in many different areas. That's kind of just beginning. We're still very early on that as well. So thank you for some of those examples. I found that really fascinating. And all of this opportunity is what we're seeing show up in your stock price. I do want to look at the chart because, again, we met you back last summer, I think in a June timeframe, and your stock was down well under $5. And it has grown so much since then, up well over 100% in the last year. You're seeing a ton of growth, but I think what's most exciting, looking at some of the details of your stock in specific, is what analysts are saying about the future for Draganfly.
For a small cap company like us to get the coverage that we've got by analysts, from small cap and mid cap and arguably even larger than mid cap banks with really, incredibly strong brands with incredibly well-regarded analysts is really exciting. And I think fairly unique, not to Draganfly, but unique to the drone industry because people see that growth. But for us to get that kind of coverage is really validating. We certainly don't give guidance or backlog numbers at this point, but those analysts have done some really good work, and I feel pretty comfortable with what they're suggesting.
The analysts are looking at it, seeing a lot of growth ahead for the future. And this conversation just shows there's so many areas of potential growth ahead for Draganfly. Thank you so much for the conversation today, Cameron. It was so interesting. If you want to hear a previous conversation from last summer with Cameron, make sure to go and watch that interview. He really went into detail on how drones can be used in warfare, how they've proven to work. And it's a fascinating conversation again. So go back and watch our previous interview too.